Hey folks, welcome back for another edition of Economics here at good old Lawrence County High School. You know, we're in the economic theory chapter, which is Unit 2. And remember, we looked at Adam Smith, who's the father of economics and also known as the father of capitalism. We looked at Karl Marx, who is known as the father of communism. We looked at F.A. Hayek and John Maynard Keynes, who sort of fell in between those two. We're going to switch gears today and look a little bit at labor unions. Now, this is still involved in economic theory because this will tie in closely with one of our economists we've talked about, but we just want to focus on unions. And I think we all have a pretty good understanding of what unions are, but let's think about where they came from. Oh, and this is a picture of Tyler Maynard in a tutu, and I don't know what's on this. So a labor union is an organization of workers formed to improve the wages, working conditions, and benefits of its members. So usually when we think about unions, we're going to divide up into two camps here. You're either going to be with the workers or the members, or you'll be with management. And management will be those who represent the owners of the companies. So when we're drawing lines here of disagreement, usually it's the workers of the union wants management to meet some sort of demand. Maybe it's higher wages, maybe it's better working conditions, maybe it's shorter hours, we don't know. But that's where we're usually going to see a disagreement between, when we're talking about labor relations, is between management and the workers. One way that things get solved through a labor union, and I guess I should step back and say really what a labor union is. It's whenever you work at a place, there are many places of employment where you are able to unionize and join a group of people who do the same job you do, and you sort of stick together as a group of people. All the people employed there will be in the union, and so they do things basically under an idea called collective bargaining. And that's to say, if I worked at a place where there was no union and I didn't think I was getting paid enough money, I would go complain to my boss and say, I need more money. And he would say, well, I'm just not going to give you more money. And if I didn't like it, then I could just quit. And that's just one worker gone, and that's not a big deal. But if you have a labor union, then all of the workers go to the boss and they say, we all need more money. And if the boss says, well, I'm not going to give you more money, then all the workers can say, okay, we're not going to work anymore. That's this idea of collective bargaining. Collective. The whole group of people is going to say, well, if you don't give us more money, we're not going to work anymore. And now you're losing your entire workforce, which really will probably get the attention of your boss a little faster. So it's negotiating the terms of employment between the management and a labor union. So everyone is involved. If we look at some of the things that have been worked out through collective bargaining, wages and working conditions, work norms, which means what's the rule of how work will take place here, incentive payments, job security, changes in technology, work tools, staff transfers, grievances, disciplinary matters, health and safety, insurance benefits, union recognition, union activities, and management rights. So really, I guess one of the most powerful tools that you have if you're a labor union and you can't get management to see things your way is the ability to strike, which is basically a work stoppage by the employees, which is used to force management to give in to their demands. And if you've ever driven by and seen a group of people on strike, you probably saw them on a picket line. So this is a gathering of striking workers near the job site, and it's used to call attention to the strike and also to prevent these replacement workers from coming in and taking your job. So oftentimes you'll see them on the sidewalks and they'll be carrying signs saying, we're on strike against this company and they're not doing us fairly, and we would just assume you didn't use this company. And a lot of union people stick together. Even if you're in a union of a completely different kind, you may say, well, if they're not being good to our union brothers here, we're not going to use their whatever it is they provide, or we're not going to buy their goods or services until they work out an agreement. So with picket lines, you can have people who try to cross that line to go fill your job and be a replacement worker. And workers get in the unkind name as scab. So a scab is a person who is a replacement worker that crosses a picket line to go work. Now you'll see a scene here. This was from Harlan County in Kentucky, and there was a coal mine strike going on. And these miners are all lined up trying to block the job site, and this is a pickup truck with some replacement workers coming through trying to come to work. And you can see the Kentucky State Police are here trying to clear the way because it's against the law to block a public road. So this comes from a documentary called Harlan County, USA, and if we were in class, I would show that to you. It's a fairly lengthy documentary, but it won a lot of awards. And it really shows the struggle of Kentucky miners against the coal companies that have been going on up through the 1970s. And finally in the 1970s, they say we've had enough, we want to unionize. So once again, in our Corona days here, if you're looking for something to do, watch the documentary Harlan County, USA. It teaches you a lot about unions and just about our area in general, just how coal mining was such an important part of our economy and our lives here in Eastern Kentucky. So you'll see these picket signs calling out scabs. I recall there was a strike one time at Ashland Oil, and I would drive by there and there would be guys hanging out. They had a 55-gallon drum with a fire built in it to keep them warm. And they had this giant piece of plywood, and they would put it up, and I guess they changed it every day, and they would say, this is the scab of the day, and they would write one of the replacement workers' names on it, just to make him look bad to his community. Also recall at the Big Sandy power plant, they had a strike down there. I'm going to guess it might have been in the 70s or 80s, probably in the 80s. And there was a picket line set up there, and so AEP actually brought replacement workers up the river in a boat to the back of the power plant and got them in, so they didn't have to cross the picket line. And the way I understood it was those workers came in and pretty much lived in the power plant for maybe a week or two at a time. And they would sleep there and wake up and do the job while the other people were still on strike. When we look at labor unions, and my data here is a couple years old, this could have changed a little bit. 14.5 million union workers are in the United States. Of those, 7% are private sector workers. That means they're just working jobs that are not controlled by the government. Public sector workers, 35% are unionized. Once again, public sector means things like school teachers or police officers, people who are basically paid out of tax dollars. That means you're in the public sector. If you're just working for a company like McDonald's or a coal company or Apple, that's private sector. So you see a lot more unionization in the public sector jobs. Education and protective services have the highest rates of union workers, which means teachers. And we have a teachers union here in Kentucky. It's called KEA, and there's a couple other ones, but KEA is the big one. So a lot of teachers that teach here in this school belong to the Kentucky Education Association. Agriculture, finance, and food service workers have the lowest percentage of unionization. A lot of these are not high-paying jobs, and they just simply don't really unionize very much. A little statistic here, the average pay per week of a union worker is about $1,000 a week. Of a non-union worker, about $800 a week. When we look at percentage of union workers, New York currently has the highest percentage at 23.6%. South Carolina with the lowest at 1.6%. And somewhere you want to know where Kentucky is, we're sort of in the middle. We have 11% of our workers here in Kentucky are unionized. When we look at union dues, and that's what you have to do to join a union, you have to pay money into the union. So what typically happens is, the union will take a small amount of your pay out of your check each month, and you really don't even miss it, and that goes to pay your union dues. It's money paid by union members to pay for the organization and negotiations provided for by the union. We'll close up looking at types of labor arrangements. There's something called a closed shop, which means it's an agreement that a company can hire only union workers. So if you live in a state that permits there to be closed shops, if you're going to get a job, you have to join the union before you can work there. There's also something called a union shop, which means you can get a job without joining a union, but you have a period of time, and at that period of time, let's say it's 90 days, you either need to join the union or you can't work there any longer. Finally, we have something called an agency shop, where non-union workers must pay union dues. So maybe you have a place, and let me give you an example. This school is a good example. Some teachers here belong to the union, some teachers do not. But if you worked in a place that was an agency shop, even if you weren't in the union, you would have to pay some dues. And the thought process is here, you're getting some of the benefits of being in the union, even though you're not in the union, so we're gonna make you pay a little bit. Kentucky doesn't do that. And finally, you have something called the open shop, where employees are not required to join a union. So you can go there and get a job and you never have to join the union. And a lot of places just don't even have unions there. I think Walmart would be an example. There is no union at Walmart. But then something like Kroger, which is a grocery store, is a unionized place. So it's interesting to see who's union and who's not. Last thing we'll talk about today is right to work laws. And this basically is a law that says employees may not be forced to join a union in order to be hired by a company, which basically means it's an open shop. So even though it says right to work, it's saying you have a right to work without being in the union. And this varies from state to state. Some states have right to work laws, some states do not. What we'll see is that wages are typically lower in right to work states, which means that businesses can operate and people don't unionize in some of those businesses that they work for, which means their wages are probably going to be lower. Kentucky used to not be a right to work state, but we shifted gears here a couple of years ago and became a right to work. And if you look here is the right to work states. Now remember, these are states that say you cannot be forced to join a union to work in any of these places. And it's really interesting if you look at a place like Michigan, because Michigan actually made its fortune on being the automobile manufacturer of the United States. Detroit was where the big three automakers all assembled cars. And that became one of the stronger unions, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But now it is a right to work state, which means you can't be forced to join a union. We'll leave off here for today, all talking about labor unions. And really why this pops up in this series is, think about Karl Marx, because Karl Marx was the person that said workers are being exploited by the owners or management. And a lot of times people who are in the union will be referred to and called communists in a very negative connotation. But that's why, because these people are standing up for the working class and they basically have some of the same belief systems as Karl Marx. We'll stop it here and I'll see you tomorrow with more fun stuff.